Hello and welcome to this edition of the Halcyon Show. My name's Lorne Risley, and on this episode I thought I'd take a dive into the annals of gaming history, back to the days where kids and adults alike found refuge from work and school in the hallowed halls of the web browsing gaming site. Before online gaming really caught fire in its current incarnation of inter-console gaming that links gamers in the millions across the world, this is what we meant by online gaming. 15-minute bursts of mindless fun in the form of often flash games created by aspiring programmers, enthusiasts, and talented teenagers with just the most bloodthirsty of appetites. Good times. Anyways, I thought it might be fun to go back and revisit some of the classics from that era, and today I'm going to kick off with a favourite of me and my fellow Year 6 students, the Ray series. Well, what is it? It's a 2-game flash series that follows a hitman / gangster / low-level criminal / Max Payne ripoff called Ray in the style of a South Park cartoon. And trust me, that's being generous as far as the description goes. Around this time, it was hard to find a title that wasn't directly inspired or just plain ripping off Max Payne or The Matrix. Originally dropping in October of 2003 and September of 2004 respectively, both games were made by Philljc, an animator and programmer from Australia. We did get an introduction to a third game. We'll touch on that later. The gameplay itself boils down to selecting options depending on how violent or stealthily you want to play, and then riding the consequences to the next scene, interspersed with the occasional point-and-click gunfight or QuickTime event. The first game follows Ray, who is our eponymous protagonist, who is tasked with the rescue of a kidnapped girl. Why rescue her? Who for? Why was she kidnapped in the first place? Who the fuck knows? Shut the fuck up and click the button, that's why. In actual fact, the first part of the first game simply follows Ray as he goes about his day, being confronted by a homeless guy, creeping on a guy who is stalking your girlfriend, and then meeting with some crude cut dude for a mission paying $5,000 with a security guard handcuffed to a fence behind the bar, where all this shit goes down apparently. After pimp slapping the poor git from Mohammed I'm Hard Bruce Lee into Eminem from his Arse Like Dat video, you head off to rescue her by massacring at least 6 guys in the house she's being held in, to being pursued by a helicopter. Once she is rescued and you arrive home, that's the game over. The second game, to its credit, is much more nuanced in its approach to the story and the world. I'm just kidding. For fuck's sake, it opens with a montage of Ray training with a porno mustache, for fuck's sake. How nuanced do you think this game is going to be? Anyways, he gets paid for saving the girl from the previous game, and is given another mission relating to the sale of droguilas. What drugs, you ask, or who they're for, or why are you suddenly a drug dealer? Who the fuck cares? Shut up and select your next option, that's why. But before he gets cracking with that, he has to assassinate a random security guard. His friend has been tied and thrown in the trunk of a car. You then take the poor git to torture for information on the target. Why are you killing the other guy? Who for? Who is he? Who is this guy you're torturing? Shut the fuck up, that's who, what, where, and when. In a move that I would argue predates GTA 5's torture scene by at least a decade, you shock the guy with a taser over the edge of a balcony until he talks. Or until your hand gets tired from hitting the spacebar, in which case he probably will, maybe definitely fall to his death. But assuming he talks, at that point you choose your weaponry for the mission to kill the guy. Depending on your choice, you make your way to a yacht where he's hiding out, and murder him. Why was he hiding on a boat in the uniform he was wearing in the picture you saw originally? What's wrong with your face? That's why. Anyway, Ray and some guy you've never met, who is the South Park version of Steve Buscemi, find your associates dead, but decide to press on with the deal regardless. Ray goes down dressed as a hitman if he were trained by Ron Perlman, and attempts to retrieve the drugs. However, he is ambushed, and a gunfight ensues, because no drug deal ever goes down without a gunfight. It's how drug dealers become so wealthy. Anyway, after they escape, Ray makes his way to a house in the middle of the jungle. Because most metropolitan cities and jungles are in close proximity with each other, I guess. Anyways, he attempts to find out more about the people responsible for stealing the drugs he was attempting to buy. He makes his way in and manages to locate the location of where the drugs are being held, which happens to be in a snow-covered bunker in the mountains, which are handily located nearby to a city which is nearby to a fucking jungle for some reason. Anywho, he goes back to Crude Cut and reports his findings, who promises to source his gear in a helicopter for his mission, but tells him he better retrieve the drugs or face the consequences. He makes his way to the snow-covered compound, murders some other guys, gets into the bunker, is rumbled, and makes good his escape, drug-free to the delight of straight-edge fans everywhere. At this point, he decides it's a good idea to head to the bar where the Crude Cut hangs out, despite his express warning not to return empty-handed. So, Crude Cut shoots Ray twice for failing, and the game ends on something of a cliffhanger for the third game. And while the motivations of Crew Cut remain unclear, as does who he worked for and what kind of business he was running, I'm sure the third game will clear up everything. The third game was never released, and only a kind of introduction from the end of the second game into what was supposed to be the third game was ever released. And that was it. Now sure, the differing paths that the options allow you do allow you to deviate a little bit depending on your playthrough, in that you can die at various points of the game in the story if you make the wrong choices. But there's no punishment for this, given it merely reloads the choice you were making prior to making it. But by and large, the illusion of choice is really a gimmick to sell the different ways Ray can tackle situations that lead to the same outcome. It seemed much more clever at the time, but given hindsight, it's a little shallow in terms of a cohesive narrative, to the point I would argue that Twilight's story made a degree more sense than this game did. And trust me when I say that hurts me to say in a way I can't quite express. And yet, there is still something undeniably fun about this pokey little flash game, hashed out by one guy as a passion project. Now, sure, the gameplay options are, limited. The few occasions where you do get an opportunity to be able to shoot with a gun, the aiming is clunky, slow, the trigger is exceptionally so, almost like it was telegraphed and it has to be reminded that it is a trigger. The reload button with the spacebar was again limited, the flip option, and the other integration of any interaction mechanics are again limited beyond the choices. And of course, the sound and the graphics and the animations aren't what we would expect of even a flash game of this era. But for the time though, you have to understand, to have a game this well animated, with at least the attempt at diverse voice acting, sound effects, and even the attempt at a classic 80s action hero montage equipped with a badass theme song, which is not something you saw every day. Its competition was a series of very linear, yet well-animated stick fighting games called Xiao Xiao, and counter-terrorism games that let you punch Osama bin Laden in the face. For its day, it certainly stood out. The first game can be hashed out in about 10 minutes, but with multiple playthroughs it can maybe take you up to 45 to see everything. The second game is much longer, due in no small part to the longer cutscenes, the additional missions, the minigames, and the odd choice to have a map you navigate, which only functions to pad out the game without adding any real substance to it. But saying that, Raid 2 can take up to 2 hours to see everything if you hammer through it by skipping the sections that you've already seen and perhaps failing some of the minigames multiple times. Overall, these games have not aged the best, I will concede. In fact, I probably have Milk from 2003 that's likely in better shape. Its gameplay, when it does veer into point-and-click shooting, is clunky and disjointed, and when you're selecting options, it typically boils down to how violent you want to be. The voice acting is on par with the kind that you'd find at a third-year nativity play, and the story is so laughably cliché and nonsensical that not even casting Nicolas Cage as the lead would make it engaging. And yet, somehow, these games hold a special place in my heart because they showed what could be done with the right know-how and the right level of talent. Who would I recommend this game to? Well, if you have 10 to 15 minutes to kick around a little bit on the internet, and for whatever reason you're not on a console or a PC version of a gaming sphere like Steam, then why not take a look at Ray? It's a precursor to a lot of point-and-click adventures that you see on indie developers these days, and while many indie games these days are of course made by single developers or a team of very small individuals, this is a throwback to a time where passion projects really were passion projects. Even getting a game uploaded to a website proved difficult. Don't even get me started on how you render it and program it. This game is a game that was produced through sheer force of will, and you have to respect that. And of course, if you just have an insatiable bloodlust, why not dive in for 2 hours or so? But that was my review of the Ray series. Thank you very much for watching this edition of the Halcyon Show. Please like, share and subscribe. Also, stay tuned for more content on my channel and indeed over on Defunct Games. Chances are I'm producing a weekly show over there called 10 Things We Learned This Week, focusing on game-related content. And indeed here, you'll see the best interviews with the very finest guests, along with the occasional, games review. Dipping my toe back in on this one, and I want to see if you guys like it. Thank you once again for watching. Please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next edition of the Halcyon Show.